If you need to find a name for the car you've just created, More For You is a rich source of inspiration. The choice is almost limitless, and while it's best to avoid something as uncharismatic as the blobfish or as difficult to spell as the zooloid squintly, there are still many opportunities. So many of them have been used, in fact, that we're going to limit the field here by sticking mostly to mammals. Though we've added a couple of reptiles to the end of our list of animal-named car model names, not Marquez, from the 20th century, to enhance your reading pleasure. The cars are presented in alphabetical order. 1. AC Greyhound. AC found almost no inspiration among mammals for its car names. But it did use Greyhound, suggesting pace and, perhaps, loyalty, for a model it produced from 1959 to 1963. This was related to the Ace and the Asica, though built in smaller numbers than either. Unlike the Ace Roadster, it was a closed-roof Grand Tourer. That gave it a closer resemblance to the Asica, though the Greyhound was several inches longer. 2. Apperson Jackrabbit. There are several species of mammal commonly known as jackrabbit, though strictly speaking they are hares rather than true rabbits. The Apperson Company, which built cars in Indiana during the first quarter of the 20th century, had a stylized, running jackrabbit as its logo. And also named several of its cars after the animal, using the alternative spelling jackrabbit. 2 of the 8 models listed in an early Apperson catalog are called Jackrabbit. A baby tonneau 4-seater costing $4,000, pictured, and a much racier 2-seater roadster priced at $4,250. Many years after the company folded in 1926. At least 2 bands, one in Indiana and another in California, were named Apperson Jackrabbit after the cars. 3. Buick Wildcat. Buick first used the Wildcat name in 1962 for a subseries of the Invicta model range. Wildcat then became a separate model, produced over 2 generations for the rest of the decade. The name has also been applied to several concept cars, including an EV revealed in June 2022. Since we're avoiding triviality here, it's important to note that Buick was not simply referring to any old non-domestic cat. Wildcat actually refers to a number of specific species found in various parts of Europe, Asia, and Africa. 4. Chevrolet Impala. Chevrolet marketed 10 generations of Impala over more than 60 years, though not continuously. Most recently abandoning the name as part of GM's decision to stop building saloon cars in the US. The animal it's named after is a type of antelope. Impala, a word taken directly from the Zulu language, is how it's most commonly known in the West, though other names are used. Chevrolet Impalas were not specifically high-performance cars, but they were often fitted, at least in the early days, with powerful engines. This makes the name reasonably appropriate. While the Impala is not the fastest antelope in the world, according to the Guinness Book of Records, that's the goitered gazelle. A healthy specimen can run at around 50 miles per hour, which makes it capable of escaping most predators. 5. Dachshund 7 Little Buffaloes. Even among the many colorful characters who have tried their luck in the motor industry, William Schoem stands tall. One of his projects was the dizzyingly unsuccessful Dachshund Company, which produced a type of car known as a high-wheeler. In earlier years, this would have passed without comment, but by 1908 high-wheelers were considered extremely unfashionable. And the business folded almost immediately. The best thing about the car, and one of the few reasons it is still known today, is that Schoem decided to call it 7 Little Buffaloes. It's not clear why he did this, but at least it shows that he had a strong, if curious, sense of creativity. 6. De Tommaso Mangusta. Mangusta is the Italian word for mongoose, a small animal renowned for eating snakes. The choice of name appears to have occurred to Alejandro de Tommaso after Carroll Shelby pulled out of a deal to co-produce a sports car called the P70. Shelby, of course, was the man who came up with the idea of the AC Cobra. In fact, a mongoose will eat almost anything it can catch, though it does have an advantage over snakes in that it is resistant to their venom. As a public service, we should also point out that the plural of mongoose is not mongeese. Even though it sounds like it ought to be to a native English speaker, but mongooses. 7. De Tommaso Pantera. The Pantera was the immediate replacement for the Mangusta. Alejandro de Tomaso's feelings towards Carroll Shelby had presumably cooled down by the time it was introduced. Since Pantera is the Italian word for panther, a type of animal not particularly famous for its consumption of snakes. Panther is a fairly loose term. Several animals known as panthers, including the type found in Florida, are strictly speaking cougars. However, leopards, lions, jaguars and tigers are classified within the genus Panthera, which is part of Pantherini, big cats in general, a subfamily of Felidae, all cats. 8. Dodge Ram. Dodge began using the Ram name for its trucks and vans in 1980, and established Ram as a separate brand in 2010. In this context, a ram is not a species of animal, but a male sheep which has been left as nature intended and is therefore still capable of fathering other sheep. Ram is also one of several common names for the ram cichlid, a small freshwater fish endemic to parts of South America. However, since the ram logo, which first appeared as a hood ornament in 1932, depicts a sheep with very large horns, it's clear that Dodge wasn't thinking about fish when it chose the name. 9. Fiat Panda. The large, monochrome bear usually referred to as the panda is officially named Giant Panda to distinguish it from the much smaller red panda. The two are related only in the sense that they are both carnivorous mammals. Fiat has used the name for small cars since 1980, but although that's enough for inclusion in our list, the derivation is actually slightly different. According to Fiat, the car is named after the Roman goddess Impanda, who might have been a deity in her own right or, it is said, might simply have been Juno going under another title. There's still an animal, but non-mammal, connection, though, since an Impanda is a species of jumping spider. 10. Ford Bronco. As we'll see, Ford has a long history of naming cars after mammals. The first, alphabetically, is the Bronco, an SUV which made its debut in 1966 and was discontinued after 5 generations 30 years later, before re-emerging as 2 separate models in 2021. A Bronco is a horse, but not of a specific type. The word is used for any breed with a tendency to buck, which makes them popular in rodeo events. There is therefore a slight connection, in name at least, with the rodeos manufactured by Isuzu and Renault, though neither of these directly refers to an animal. 11. Ford Corcel. The Corcel was Ford's small saloon, an estate and sometimes coupe, sold in South American markets from 1968 to 1986. Despite the Ford branding, it was originally developed by Willis Overland, and was closely related to the Renault 12. In both Spanish, the most widely spoken language on the continent, and Portuguese, the official language of Brazil, Corcel means steed, or courser, or perhaps charger. Whatever the exact translation, it refers to a horse, theoretically of any breed, but always used for riding, and often in a military context. What it doesn't mean, in either language, is horse in the general sense. That translates into caballo in Spanish, and the closely related cavalo, male, or more linguistically distant égua, female, in Portuguese. 12. Ford Cougar. Under the name shown here, the Cougar was a short-lived coupe derivative of the Mondeo which made its debut late in the 20th century. The same vehicle was also the 8th, and at the time of writing most recent, example of the car marketed in North America as the Mercury Cougar. As an animal, the cougar is the largest of the small cats, therefore excluding those in the genus Panthera, which can purr but not roar. It is also known by many other names, including panther, as mentioned before, puma, mountain lion and catamount. 13. Ford Mustang. The original Mustang was a concept revealed in 1962. Cars of the same name have been in continuous production over 7 generations, or 8 if you include the Mach-E electric SUV. The vehicle was directly named after the North American Aviation P-51 Mustang fighter plane used in the Second World War. But it ultimately refers back to a breed of horse. In the animal sense, Mustangs are free-roaming horses found in the western United States. They are officially feral, which means that they are wild but are descended from domesticated animals. These were brought over from Spain, starting in the late 15th century. 14. Ford Pinto. Pinto is the Spanish word for I paint and is used as an adjective, too. The animal connection is that a pinto is also a horse, not of any specific breed, but with one of several multicolored coat patterns. There is a myth that the Ford Pinto sold very badly in Brazil because the word means something quite different, and rather unfortunate, in Portuguese. In its most extreme form, the story includes a reference to Ford having to rename the car Corcel. Although you can read this on many badly researched websites, it's nonsense, on two counts. First, the Pinto was never marketed anywhere in South America, or Ford sold the Corcel instead. Second, the Corcel had already been in production for 2 years before the Pinto was launched. 15. Ford Puma. The Puma SUV doesn't qualify for this list because it was launched too recently. But the name was also used for a Fiesta-based coupe produced around the turn of the century. As previously mentioned, the animal commonly known as the puma is in fact a cougar. However, puma is also the name of a genus within the cat family, of which today's cougar is the only living member. Some extinct cats, originally thought to have been members of other families, have been reclassified as pumas long after their fossils were discovered. 16. Ford Taurus. As car manufacturers generally do, Ford put a lot of thought into what it should call the new mid-sized model it would introduce in the 1986 model year. Members of the public were given a choice of 20 names, of which the most popular was Integra. Instead of going with that, though, Ford stuck to the vehicle's codename, Taurus. This was reputedly chosen by engineer Louis Veraldi and product planner John Risk after they discovered that their wives were both born in May, under the sign of Taurus. The origin of the name as applied to the car is therefore astrological, but it is also the Latin word for bull. The animal which the constellation of Taurus looks a bit like, if viewed with considerable imagination. 17. Hillman Husky. A husky can be any one of several breeds of dog which is comfortable in cold climates and strong enough to be able to pull a sled for great distances at remarkable speed. Hillman first used the name for an estate version of the contemporary Minx in 1954. 3 more husky derivatives of the Minx were produced from 1958 to 1965. After a short gap, the name was transferred to yet another estate, this time based on the Imp. Hillman presumably used it to suggest how useful the cars would be to their owners, as the dogs certainly are. 18. Hyundai Pony. Hyundai used the Pony name for the first model it sold outside South Korea and, later, for export versions of the Excel. In equestrian circles, the definition of a pony is a little vague. It essentially means an adult horse of, in theory, any breed, measuring no more than 14.2 hands. The name can be used for larger horses, polo ponies, for example, though an expert tells us that this is similar to adult women referring to themselves as girls, i.e. inaccurate but inoffensive. To complicate matters still further, the Falabella, which is absolutely tiny, is considered to be horse, but not a pony. There is also some uncertainty surrounding the definition of a pony car. Broadly speaking, this is a relatively small but sporty American coupe or convertible. At least one size down from a muscle car, though the increasing size of what were once pony cars has muddied the waters. We can safely say this about pony cars, however, the Hyundai Pony definitely isn't one of them. 19. Lamborghini Miura. Ferruccio Lamborghini was enthusiastic about bullfighting, and many of his company's cars have been given names related to the sport. Rather than list all of them here, we'll concentrate on the earliest. Launched in 1966, the Miura is generally regarded as the first mid-engine supercar, though not the first mid-engine road-going production car. Miura is a type of Spanish fighting bull bred on a farm near Lora del Rio in southwest Spain. One particularly famous Miura bull, Islero, which had the unusual distinction of killing its matador rather than the other way round, was honored by having another Lamborghini named after it. 20. Mazda Bongo. Although it appears to refer to a type of drum, the Mazda Bongo is in fact named after a large antelope. How large, exactly? Well, the bongo is actually the third biggest of all antelopes, dwarfed only by the giant eland and common eland. Mazda's first Bongo, pictured, was a light van introduced in 1966. Subsequent vehicles of the same name, many of which shared the original model's cabover design, have included other commercial vehicles, along with MPVs capable of carrying up to 8 passengers. 21. Mercury Bobcat. While the derivation of the Ford Pinto's name tends towards the vague, its Mercury badged equivalent refers to a specific type of animal. The bobcat, which lives in Mexico, southern Canada, and most of the contiguous United States, is the smallest member of the lynx family, behind the Eurasian lynx, which can be pretty hefty, the Canada lynx, and the Iberian lynx. Its name comes from its bobbed tail, which is unusually short compared with its body length in cat terms, though in fact it shares this characteristic with all other lynxes. No car called Bobcat has ever been sold with a Ford badge, though this was the name of the project which became the first-generation Fiesta. 22. Mercury Sable. The Ford Taurus, previously mentioned, was also marketed by Ford's slightly upmarket brand as the Sable. A sable is a small mammal which forms part of the marten family. As with the mink, which is more distantly related, its fur is highly prized by people who make and buy expensive clothes, and even more so by the sable itself. The former aspect is probably what appealed to Mercury, since it gives the name a connotation of luxury. 23. Mitsubishi Colt. There are several definitions of the word colt, but all of them refer to a young male horse. Mitsubishi has used it as a model name for small cars since the early 1960s. In the UK, Mitsubishis were imported by the Colt Car Company, which used Colt as the mark name. For example, the car sold in Japan as the Mitsubishi Lancer was known in the UK as the Colt Lancer. In the US, the same vehicle was marketed as the Dodge Colt. These examples contradict the fact that it wasn't a Colt at all in the Japanese sense. 24. Mitsubishi Pajero. Mitsubishi's large off-roader, along with several smaller models, was known in the UK as the Shogun and in other markets as the Montero. But in Japan it was always referred to as the Pajero. Despite this, Pajero is not a Japanese word. It refers to what is sometimes described as a subspecies, Leopardus pajeros, of the pampas cat, Leopardus colocula, which lives in many parts of South America. By one definition, there are in turn 5 types of Leopardus pajeros, but they are not all universally recognized. In fact, there is a lot of uncertainty about the whole business. Several sources give Leopardus pajeros as the overall name for pampas cats in general. 25. Nissan Leopard. After the confusion regarding the pampas cat, it comes as a relief to switch our attention to the leopard. There's no argument that a leopard is a large, spotted cat, though there are several varieties spread across a wide geographical range in Africa and Asia. Nissan used the name for 4 generations of sporting luxury saloons and coupes produced from 1980 to 1999. In the latter year, Nissan decided that the Leopard was superfluous and dropped it. Today's equivalents are the non-SUV models in the Infiniti range. 26. Reliant Kitten. The Kitten occupies an interesting position in Reliant's history. Before it was launched in 1975, Reliant had specialized in sporting models and small 3-wheeled passenger cars, as well as a variety of commercial vehicles. The Kitten was its first small 4-wheeler, and the first car intended from the start to use the 848 cubic centimeters version of Reliant's own engine. Though this unit was also introduced to the mechanically similar, but 3-wheeled, Robin at the same time. To return to the theme of this article, the Kitten was the first of only 2 Reliants named after mammals, the second being the fox. 27. Seat Leon. The Leon just qualifies for inclusion here on 2 counts. First, it appeared very late in the 20th century, having been launched in first-generation form in 1999. Second, it is, strictly speaking, one of several seats named after places in Spain. Others include the Córdoba, the Ibiza, and the Toledo. However, Leon is not only the name of a city but also the Spanish word for lion, and you can't argue that a lion isn't a mammal. Leons of all generations can be described as seats equivalent of the Volkswagen Golf, but that's rather simplistic, because they are also related to several other VW Group models. The name has also been used by Seat's more recently formed sporting brand, Cupra. 28. Singer Chamois. The car best remembered as the Hillman Imp was also marketed under the Singer and Sunbeam brands. The Sunbeams were known either as Imp or, in the case of the high-performance coupe, Stiletto. In Singer's case, the car was renamed Chamois, after a goat found in mountains across Europe. It is sometimes referred to as a goat antelope, though it isn't an antelope at all. And the name might have been chosen as a contrast to the larger gazelle, which, as we'll see, was also used for a Singer, and definitely is an antelope. The Singer Chamois was produced as both a saloon and a coupe, with no change of name, and was both better equipped and more expensive than the standard Imp. 29. Singer Gazelle. The word gazelle describes several current and extinct members of the antelope family. It was used for the first Singer model produced after the brand was taken over by the Roots Group in 1955. This was part of the Audax range, which also included the mechanically almost identical, and similarly styled, Hillman Minx and Sunbeam Rapier, the Australian Hillman Gazelle and the Commer Cobb van. The series ran, with many updates, until 1967. At that point, the Gazelle name was transferred, as Hillman Minx and Sunbeam Rapier were, to the new Roots Aero range. The 26,846th Gazelle of this generation, which left the factory in March 1970, was the last Singer ever built, not including the modified Porsche 911s created by the unrelated Singer vehicle design. 30. Stutz Bearcat. The first Stutz was a racing car called the Bearcat, which performed respectably in the inaugural Indianapolis 500. In 1911, finishing on the same lap as the leader, in 11th place. A production version was introduced the following year. Later models, whose name changed to Bearcat, continued until the early 1920s. Much later Bearcats, based on the Blackhawk, appeared in the 1970s and 1980s. A bearcat might sound like an imaginary creature, but in fact it's a real animal, a cat-like mammal found in increasingly small numbers across South and Southeast Asia. Its official name is Binturong. As far as we know, nobody has ever built a car called Binturong, which perhaps is a pity. 31. Sunbeam Tiger. Sunbeam first used the Tiger name in the 1920s for a car which achieved the now unimaginable combination of being successful in circuit racing and, in 1926, setting a new land speed record. Its 4-liter engine, the smallest internal combustion unit ever used in a successful LSR attempt, was created by joining two 2-liter twin cams and supercharging them. The next Sunbeam Tiger was a sports car produced in 2 generations from 1964 to 1967. Similar in concept to the AC Cobra. It was a Sunbeam Alpine sports car adapted to take a Ford Windsor V8 engine, initially measuring 4.3 liters and later 4.7 liters. 32. Triumph Stag. Depending on who you ask, a stag is either an adult male red deer, or an adult male of any large deer species. The stag is often considered a noble beast, which could not initially be said of the Triumph sports car named after it. Beautiful though it undoubtedly was, the stag, or rather its 3-liter V8 engine, quickly developed a reputation for being appallingly unreliable. The problems leading to this have largely been solved by specialists and the engine is no longer considered a liability. 33. Volkswagen Lupo. Introduced in 1998, the Lupo was a city car based on a shortened version of the platform used for the 3rd-generation Volkswagen Polo, among other vehicles. It was mechanically identical to the Seat Arosa, which was launched a year earlier but had a smaller lineup. For example, only the Lupo had a high-performance GTI derivative in the range. Lupo is the Latin word for wolf, and it is understood to have been chosen in reference to Wolfsburg, the German city where VW has its headquarters. It was widely reported at one point that the Lupo name would be revived for a later Volkswagen city car known during its development stage as the Up, but this did not happen. 34. Volkswagen Rabbit. Except in the cases of some saloons and estates, the Volkswagen Golf has been known by that name in nearly every market for close to half a century. There are only 2 exceptions. The mammal-related one is that the car was sold as the Rabbit in the United States during its first generation. Possibly, it said, out of fear that Americans wouldn't want to buy a car with the same name as a sport. The policy changed for the second generation but was reintroduced for the fifth, on the basis that American owners would be delighted by the reference to a successful car produced 3 decades earlier. That didn't work, so VW abandoned the idea for the sixth generation, and has not revisited it since.